Background noise. All right, so let's give it a minute before we officially commence. Hi, everyone. We're just giving it just a minute or two before we kick off because we still have a number of people coming onto the webinar. Okay, it looks like we have a quorum, so let's move ahead. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar that is hosted and sponsored by Cura Software. Today's webinar is all about the impact of AI on GRC strategy. I'm Kerushan Govender. I will act as your host for today. I do have a track record of sorts in the GRC space. I've been involved in GRC for many years. In fact, more recently in the IMSA 2024 risk report, I've been a contributor. I've acted as a thought leadership contributor specifically in the domain of AI and the impact of AI on modern day risk management. So I do have some background myself, but it's not my job today to answer any of the questions. I have the pleasure of asking questions, and to that end, I'm joined by a very esteemed panel, some real experts who are going to shed light on this very, very vital topic of AI and its impact on today's GRC. I don't think that this topic is discussed as much as it ought to be. We live in a world where the worry about AI, the concern about AI regarding the impact on the organization is being talked about a lot. The lack of regulation, the nascent nature of the technology and its impact on businesses. We're discussing several of these topics, but very rarely is it being discussed in the context of, for example, enterprise risk management and the implications on compliance, or the implications from a governance perspective for that matter. So that's what we're going to directly address in today's webinar. We're going to talk about what it means to have AI impact the organization across the various facets of the organization, including the production line, and as a consequence of that, what does it then mean for the overarching GRC strategy of the organization? So on that note, we aim to, in the next just short of 1 hour, we aim to understand the urgency of AI-related risks. We aim to gain some practical insights into how to integrate your GRC solutions in a way that is AI ready? And then the last point is we want to really prepare for future challenges in GRC as AI becomes a more dominant force within the business space over the next 5 to 10 years. So with that, let's dive right in. I want to introduce my panel at this stage. I'm going to go one by one. Kevin, you call yourself a global data protection and commercial IT attorney. Would you mind telling us what that means?
Sure. I didn't think I'd be quizzed on my CV.
Your title, Kevin, not your CV. I have a lot more to ask you on your CV.
So my role is sort of titled that because I focus on data protection in a global context. At Michelson's, we focus on a lot of IT laws. One of the areas that I've essentially cut my teeth on is data protection and the commonality between the different kinds of data protections across the world. And also general commercial IT law is sort of bread and butter of what we do as well. So those are my two main focus areas, and that's why I call myself that. I could focus on POPIA. I don't. I focus on the broader context.
Okay, great. That's a great perspective. You see, it's worth asking because there's no way I would have guessed that just by reading your LinkedIn profile. Let's go to Titch. I'm just going to say Titch because you have a slightly more difficult to pronounce name. Titch, you come to us accompanied by a lot of background noise. Please help me understand. It says here that you have extensive experience in GRC program design and implementation. What does that mean? And just give us some insight into what you do.
All right. Good afternoon, KG, and good afternoon to all of the attendees. So my work really revolves around how do we make things work practically. There are all of these rules and regulations that we need to apply, whether it's from a governance perspective, whether it's in terms of the enterprise risk management policy of the institution, or its various compliance obligations. How do we make those make sense in varying contexts? So that's the crux of my work, that this is the big picture of what we need to do. How do we break it down for organization X and then say for organization X in our context, this is what compliance looks like for us. This is what a sound governance framework looks like for us. This is how we're interpreting what is being said as best practice for enterprise risk management.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Titch. Christo, last but not least, Christo, you are listed as a key account manager at Cura Software Solutions. Do you want to just tell us what you do?
Yeah, so obviously understanding, looking after our some of our key clients, obviously within the Cura profile. And I think the majority of that is obviously understanding their requirements, obviously, to understand with their challenges, how we're going to assist them, to have their broader picture brought all together onto one platform. If it's going to be incident management, it's going to be compliance, it's going to be risk, whatever that might be, but to understand their challenges and how we're going to solve that, and obviously having a certain software solution that actually make their life easier and get to get a bigger picture to everyone else out there.
Okay, awesome. So you are the big picture guy. Titch is the big picture guy. So that just leaves Kevin and I, with the regular lay of the land. Okay, so let's go straight to let's go back to Kevin. So Kevin, we're circling back to you now. All right. Let's talk. Let's just take a stab at this topic. It's a big topic. In your opinion, what are some of the most pressing AI-related threats that risk officers and managers should be made aware of?
Okay, that's a big question. There are a lot of different things there. And like you, I don't like focusing on the risks. I like focusing more on the opportunities of it. One of the biggest ones, it's a little bit outside of it, is, in my opinion, it's not so much the practical. It's not so much a practical risk of AI use, but rather how we handle AI, how we look at it. And one of the biggest risks, in my opinion, on that front is that a lot of people aren't looking at it at the right level. They're not establishing the correct sort of governance framework for that. Similar to that, related to that, is that there seems to be a focus on trying to approach it only once regulation has come into place. And that feels to me like it's a bit of reactive regulatory whack-a-mole, as one of the podcasters I was listening to a while back mentioned it. I can go into a little bit more detail on that, but those are sort of process-driven risks from my perspective.
All right. Okay. So obviously, when we talk about the impact of AI on the risk officer and perhaps the compliance officer, it doesn't really just stop there, right? There's also a governance element to risk management, or there's a governance element, sorry, with regards to AI and its impact on the organization. Do you want to just give us your thinking on what are some of your thoughts on the governance aspect of AI?
So one of the things that we've been seeing, like I mentioned before, is that there tends a lot of businesses that we've been speaking to tend not to be thinking about AI at a board level at the moment. And we think that this is a bit of an odd duck to find ourselves with, because of how impactful AI is on the business itself, on business strategy. A lot of businesses are looking at it as a compliance function, really, and saying, well, until such a time as something actually comes into play, then we will deal with it. Then we will start building a framework around it when we actually understand what it's going to be from a risk perspective. We think that's a little bit backwards, considering the opportunities and risks that AI provides. These are so large that we shouldn't be waiting for regulation. And I specify that these large things are risks and opportunities. Because one of the things that is very interesting to us is that AI isn't just another tool. It is going to, and already has, fundamentally changed a lot of the ways that we do business, which is going to fundamentally change the way that you approach what it is, how your business attends to the market. And that's a decision for the board. If you as the board are passing down those decisions to a particular department to look at and guard against or implement in some particular way, you don't have the sufficient control over it. And I'm just trying to see where my train of thought has just disappeared to. Yes,
that's
sorry.
okay. Remember,
okay.
As you were.
There was a particular quote that I wanted to add in here, which was, when implementing a new technology, you would essentially be looking at how can it improve your business as the first question, and the second question is looking at how can it improve your competitor's business, and that for me really sort of sums it up, because it's not just going to be applying to you. AI doesn't just affect you; it affects everyone else. So if you're not applying it within your organization, you're actually sort of creating a self-imposed digital exclusion where other people are going ahead and you're lagging behind.
All right. Okay, good. So nice message there. Folks, just for everyone on the webinar, you do have access to your Q&A box. Feel free to go ahead and place questions in there as the discussion continues. I recognize that there was a raised hand at some point. I think it's just a little bit more convenient if you drop your question into the Q&A box, and I will be sure to read them out and get them answered as we move through. I will introduce them into the dialogue. Let's move now to Titch. Titch, you have extensive experience in GRC program design and implementation. What are some of the effective mechanisms and tools that organizations can use to track and mitigate AI-related risks?
All right, so I think building on from what Kevin was talking about around how at the strategic level do we understand what it is we're trying to do with AI, when it comes to an implementation perspective, starting with a very clear use case of this is what our business is going to be doing with AI, and this is why, and this is the expected outcome. And from there, building on top of that foundation, the mechanisms to be able to track. So if it's supposed to be giving you data, for example, on your trends for a particular activity, I'll give a very good example that's trending right now, where Burger King used AI to redesign its delivery model in Mexico City, right? And the task in creating a GRC module around that project execution was our outcomes should result in an end result where we can trace what data was collected in terms of these are the people who are in the areas we're targeting our ads. And once those people logged onto the Burger King app to be able to order while they were in traffic, which was the whole idea, how long did it take for us to get from the order has been placed to payment has been made to the motorbike is pulling up to the driver's door and knocking on their window with their delivery? So once you understand your use case, I think it becomes a lot more like your traditional mitigation measures in terms of this is the process. Where are the areas that would go wrong in this process, and how do we guard against those? Of course, with the nascency of the technology itself, that can pose interesting challenges around creating sufficient human oversight, which is one of the big issues that often come up when people are saying, we're not sure we want to adopt this. Like, how is a person, can you then replicate what your AI system did and come up with the same outcome?
All right, and Titch, I'm going to take you up on some of those points that you raised now. As we move later into the discussion, as we get a bit deeper. I want to look at not just the impact of AI as an isolated thing, but as something that's very integrated on an existing production line. We have to start thinking about the fact that AI is there and it's starting to have more and more say on decisions that are behind the scenes. And I want to unpack that with you as we go along, but we will do that a little bit more in just a second. Christo, let's go to you for the minute. So let's just, again, broad stroke, high level, we're really getting into the conversation now. How can GRC software, start taking on a more pivotal role in helping organizations stay ahead of specifically the AI-driven risks? Is there something that we need to do differently or think about differently?
Well, I think it's from a GRC perspective, obviously, and the software. It is so the idea is always to assist the clients or the organization with improving efficiencies and productivity, and by streamlining processes, automated tasks, and assist the businesses to actually just look at the information much faster and managing the risk, or look at the compliance component or whatever that might be. But I think with the world of obviously AI, it's so that makes that time frame of start looking into information to the end of it takes so long to actually get that done. I think with assistance of the AI component, that whole timeline gets so much shorter. So it helps a lot more with efficiencies to get certain reporting out, or whatever that might be, decision making, looking at your controls, looking at your risk a lot faster, a lot more effectively. And I think with that being said, it actually does help shortening that risk window, if that is maybe the right word to say like that, and you can actually just manage it quite a bit easier.
Okay, and is there anything different in regards to AI, let's call it AI-driven risks, or the category of risks that are exacerbated by the introduction of AI into workflows? Do these risks need to be treated any differently from an ERM point of view, or is it just a case of we do things as we've always done it from a framework point of view, but now, as you're mentioning, things are happening faster? Like, what's your thoughts around that?
I think, I don't think we need to do anything drastically different to actually manage the risk, right? For me, it's just so you still use the same framework and stuff like that. However, managing that risk, obviously, that timeline to actually managing the risk, that is where it actually makes it so much easier. It also just assists you, as I mentioned, it supports you in your decision making and monitoring real-time controls or risk or whatever that might be. And personally, I don't think we should actually approach differently. At the end of the day, framework is your framework, and that's what you're working towards, and that's what actually assists you. But still, I think the AI component is just helping us so much faster for decision making. So yeah, so that's how I see it. Automation, automation of the risk or controls, reporting, and the efficiency of the controls, and the reporting, etc., like that. Yeah. So in my mind, I don't think so, but obviously the AI just assists so much better and faster to actually manage all these pockets of information.
Okay. I think it's important, folks, as we reflect on what AI is actually doing on various production lines within an organization, it's important for us to take a step back and acknowledge that predominantly to date, a lot of the decision making that has been happening on any workflow in an organization has been a human decision. Ultimately, humans have had oversight into the conditional logic that has been embedded into software. So the conditional logic was always the product of a human being programming it into a technology. The thing that's changed with AI is that AI is, for the first time, really taking full ownership of that decision-making process. And AI is now deciding on behalf of a human being instead of us programming the logic in advance. So now there's answers coming out. So there's things being decided upon, and there's answers coming out that we didn't pre-program into the machine. It's happening based on the AI learning patterns, detecting patterns in the data, and then taking it upon itself to make decisions that approximate the decisions that have been taken by human beings prior. And by virtue of the fact that we are no longer the decision-making entities in a whole bunch of workflows right now, it means that we've officially deferred decision-making processes into the world of the computer autonomously. So we've given the computer autonomy over several things that affect you and I on a day-to-day basis. Now, on that note, let's go back to Kevin. Kevin, just the fact that we have we're entering a new realm of decision-making and autonomy in our working world, how do we need to reinterpret or reframe how we look at risk management?
Well, my initial sort of gut response to this is that we need to make sure that the people that are actually implementing those particular tools that are going to be making those decisions have the knowledge, firstly, and are sitting at the right level within an organization to implement those tools. Because the reality is that, yes, you're passing off decision-making to a particular tool, but that doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't happen by magic. You actually have to get the tool and integrate it within your organization and your workflows. So there is still a human being that is deciding to implement that particular tool in a way. And it's important to make sure that that human understands all of the risks associated with that, the strategy that the business is going to be taking, and why they're implementing it. And that's a bit of a tricky one sometimes because of the variable nature of these particular risks. So for instance, I was having a chat with a colleague a little while ago where we use an example of a elevator AI system that determines where the elevator should be at any given time of the day. And if it's at 8 o'clock in the morning, it'll be on the ground floor when everyone's coming in. If it's around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it'll be ping-ponging between floors 3 and 4, trying to get people down quicker. Now, that's a very low-risk AI system. So the decision to implement that, to actually implement that particular tool and not necessarily implement the decisions of 8 o'clock it's going to be here, 5 o'clock it's going to be there, that can be taken at a particular sort of a low level within the organization. but a higher level tool that is making decisions or predictions on business strategy or projections on sort of market forces, that decision to implement that has to be at a much higher level because it requires more education and more sort of strategic oversight.
Okay, cool. So I see your points in regards to the overarching decision to introduce AI into the organization in the first place. Titch, if we could just follow up here a little bit from your frameworks. I know, we talk about things like elements within your ERM process. There's your traditional elements like your risk register maintenance thereof, updating. Then there's compliance self-assessments. What changes, in simple terms, what changes given that you have these autonomous computer agents that are going off and they're making decisions? I mean, let's get practical. Let's use an actual example. On a production line, you have an AI agent that is viewing an output on a production line and determining whether that unit is acceptable standard or poor standard, and they're then deciding accordingly. This is introducing a new breed of risk. I'm someone who, if you get to know me well, you'll know I like the basics, the practical. Okay, so give me some practical thinking here. How does a farmer, when I say a farmer, I'm talking about an agricultural enterprise. How do they start recognizing and managing their risks differently, given that there's autonomous agents making these decisions?
All right, I loved the analogy of a farmer because I'm a farmer myself, and a lot of my compliance training actually came from the agricultural sector. So,
look at me, huh? It's either I did my research or I got lucky.
Probably a bit of both. I wonder what AI you were using for that one. So I think that one boils down to how your compliance monitoring is structured. That's where the biggest change is going to have to happen from a GRC perspective. In terms of, we have allowed this logical framework to have control over the entire process. But what we are looking for is the people who have accountability over that process, is to be able to verify when there's an anomaly in how the process is being conducted, or where specific checks we expect to see are not being done. Right. So your traditional compliance monitoring says at a periodic interval, you go in, you sample some items, right? And then you see how many of those items conform with the formula that's set out in your policy or your framework. Where this is now being done through the use of AI tools, your compliance monitoring framework must then be alive to that and be able to work in that context. What does that look like practically? Depending on the software you're using, for example, there could be a module that provides specific oversight, whether it's real-time camera monitoring, where you're saying the system is supposed to be approving quantities that look like X. But in the monitoring, we're seeing that Y was approved, or something that met X wasn't approved, and that should flag instantly. And particularly because we're relying more on technology, you don't need necessarily a foreman standing there waiting for the anomaly to happen. You can use your camera system within that environment. I know John Deere is implementing that kind of technology with their combine harvesters and cabbage and potato pickers, where embedded within the logical framework of the AI itself is a camera module that is connected to either the cell phone or the computer of the farm owner or the farm manager that flags such anomalies, where, for example, the parameter to be input is we are rejecting cabbages that are smaller than a diameter of X centimeters. Wherever that anomaly is spotted, it immediately sends an alert to whoever is supposed to see it. And that's how the compliance monitoring itself is keeping up with the developments of the AI system that is now carrying out the work as opposed to human intervention.
That makes a lot of sense. And mind you, I love the fact that you went and got that specific and that because it gets us to start to see what AI is factually doing. So the cabbage example is great. So here you have an AI that's determining whether the size of the cabbage is appropriate or not. Now, do you have to, as a risk officer, do you have to then introduce a new risk into your register that accounts for the fact that AI could get it wrong? Is that a new risk or not?
No, I think it's a new risk. It's a new example of an existing risk description. So in your traditional register, the actual risk is
There's a bit of a disconnect there.
Are you still with me, Christo?
Yes, I'm still up. So we can
Okay,
go on my side.
Nadira, are you still going? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think KG, to talk about this a little bit more, I think which is you know, it's just throwing a little bit of a spanner in the works here. There's always a say thing in a risk environment or a risk world of our saying we don't know what we don't know, right? So we don't know what the risks are until it actually materializes, which is always an interesting thing. And I think with my thought mindset to it is that is where the whole AI capabilities can actually come to the fore. You know, that it can give you that predictive analytics type of approach, right? It can predict your type of risk that you have. It can also suggest certain controls for it, right? And I think that is where the positiveness of that, although it can be a risk on its own, as you said and as you mentioned, but I think it's a very good tool to understand a broader the I don't know what I don't know approach. You know what I'm saying? So it is I think with the predictive analytics and try to understand how to approach it, it can help quite a bit.
All right. That's good perspective, and thank you for that, Christo. You stepped in. I think there was a technical glitch, folks. So those of you on the webinar, apologies. There was a slight technical glitch, but we seem to have everything back and going. Titch, apologies for that, but you just you know, you stopped midway. You were giving us an insightful answer. If you wouldn't mind continuing.
Oh, I seem to have lost my train of thought. Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so just to go back to where you were in your discussion,
we were discussing, yes, I think I've remembered it now. Where we're
do you declare that as a risk?
Is it a new risk?
Yes.
No, it's not a new risk. It's an example of how an existing risk materializes, because the same risk can materialize in very different ways in different departments. So it's just an addition to your actual entry around how does this risk occur. And then where the real change might be is under the controls. So how are we mitigating for this new example of an existing risk that is now happening? What additional mechanisms are we putting in place?
Okay, so when you say what additional mechanisms are we putting in place, what additional mechanisms can we put in? Are you saying the additional oversight by human beings so that we're not reliant completely on that technology?
Not necessarily. I think that's now, again, going back to the specific use case of how you're applying your artificial intelligence. So in the example I gave around the John Deere tractors, right? The additional control is inbuilt into the device itself. So we've got these new tractors that are AI compatible. Right. But part of the control is built within the tractor itself, where there is constant video surveillance and a system that allows us to get information where there's an anomaly. So what we're documenting under the additional control is there's ongoing monitoring within the system itself, and this is how it operates. What then becomes the human element is being able to then get the logs of these are the anomalies that have been spotted. And then depending on how key a control that is, you can then have someone at a periodic level test the accuracy of that data. But that would normally fall within the ordinary scope of your audit activities. Where the control itself is of that higher nature, that would fall outside of the scope of compliance monitoring. It would not be an efficient use of resources. That would fall more within your regular audit calendar.
Yeah. So you're saying that the risk and control lives within the same technology, and to a large extent, that control is actually going to be, you know, mitigating whatever risk there, you know, that is posed by the use of that AI in the first place. So we don't have to stress too much down to that level. Like, sure, there might be a new risk, but there's already a mitigation built in.
Yes, depending on what kind of control you've implemented. So in that example, that would work. But if you were looking, for example, at a traffic management system, right, a failure of that system would be seen from actual implications on traffic management. It would not be the system itself that tells you there's a problem. So that would require human intervention, where someone is checking that what the AI is doing in terms of managing traffic is actually having the desired result, and you're not having routes that should be red at a particular time being green because it creates unnecessary traffic backup.
Yeah, very interesting perspectives. Okay, so let's jump back to I know Christo, you stepped in for a little bit. What I wanted to just get from you is that I'd like your honest and unbiased guidance here. Do modern day risk managers, risk professionals, compliance managers, compliance professionals, do they have to start looking for different features within their GRC toolkits? Like because of all of this?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think anything to create efficiency, in the environment, to actually again, it gets back to monitoring, as for me. So for me, they would be how to get to a decision making much faster, right? And nobody wants to sit with a risk that runs forever, So you also always want to make sure that you identify your risk as fast as possible. You put your controls in place, and it's being managed by everybody, and everybody's happy, and you start your reporting on it. And I think, obviously, in my view, is that I think that is where a system is so critical, right? Is to assist you into give you all these features and functionalities, not to confuse the audience, or to make it a long, drawn out process. Is to actually get to to understanding of how to control your risk much shorter, much faster, and you're happy, and you can actually report that to the board. It's managed and it's controlled, and you can be happy and you carry on with your life. But I think to talk about systems, I think that is super critical to always be on the forefront to understand, and that is where I sit on a daily basis, talking to my clients, talking to my key accounts. Listen, how do they see it, and how do we approach it? And you got to have a system that actually take all the data, take all the information from a person level, and design the application or design your tool to assist them to actually to shorten their lifespan, or shorten their lifespan of the risk, right? So that's a critical part, is that you have to make sure that your application can talk to them and give them that ability to actually assist their workload on a daily basis. Let's face it, right? Risk is an enormous beast, and it creates a lot of stress for a lot of people. And I think the tool will assist that, to just give them that one less gray hair to actually to try and manage it.
Yeah, absolutely. I see Mark is sending through quite a lot of comments and questions here, which is excellent. So let me just jump to a question here that Mark's placed in the chat. Does the panel see AI GRC software being one size fits all? I'm hoping that I'm conveying this correctly. I'm reading it almost exactly as is from the screen here. Anyone here wanting to take that question? I'll repeat it. Does the panel see AI GRC software being one size fits all?
I'd say no. I think because you are using your GRC software to meet the specific needs and challenges you're facing, implementing AI in addition to your traditional systems, the kind of system you get is going to have to be one that enables you to have, one, appropriate oversight over what's happening, and two, sufficient comfort that the risks you have identified are actually being mitigated effectively, and any control gaps are being escalated appropriately. And three, you're able to document what's actually happening, even if everything is going on well, particularly for entities that are in regulated sectors, where it's not enough to have a system that manages the risk. You have to be able to demonstrate at a very high level to third parties that your system is working the way you say it is. So that will probably require tweaking from sector to sector. And even within sectors, you will find there may be different considerations for different entities. For example, if you are coming from a background where your data is not as great as it could be. The kind of things you're looking at in terms of our AI system may get something wrong are very different from an entity that is coming from a background where they are very sure that their data is accurate and it does not have a high degree of inherent bias.
Okay, this is good. So, folks, to date, until now in this chat, we've been leaning a lot into the ERM conversation. We've also been talking a lot more about the, about the AI risk factor in terms of the increased number of risks that AI poses on organizations today. What I would like to start doing right now is pivoting the conversation a little bit more in the direction of the compliance piece. So we are talking a lot about the fact. I mean, I'm not talking about on the webinar in general. In the world right now, there's a lot of dialogue about AI regulation, and there are many camps out there saying that we don't have regulation, which is true because this is a nascent technology. It's developing faster than we're able to, develop regulation. I mean, AI development is far outpacing the traditional regulation life cycle that you have in any nation, in any land. So we have a little bit of an interesting conundrum with regards to regulation, standards, laws, etc. But without getting into that, I think we do have several pieces and elements of our current legislation and our typical corporate standards that we can still apply into the domain of AI, like things to do with data, how we're treating our data privacy dialogue. Mm-hmm. So there's several things that we can in fact depend on that will help us manage this AI wave a little bit more effectively. Let's go to Kevin, because this is evidently your domain. What are some of the existing tools in regards to data privacy and other pieces of standards or legislation? What can we utilize in the interim while we wait for something that's a little bit more comprehensive, overarching, and more AI specific in the way of legislation?
Yeah, so that is an interesting one. I actually had a workshop earlier this morning talking about pretty much the same kind of question. And the core of it really is that the most robust law that currently sits is the EU AI Act, and it is obviously not applicable to the majority of AI use cases in South Africa. There may be some instances in which it is, but that's not really relevant for this particular discussion at the moment. The reality is, if we assume that it doesn't apply, what are we going to be doing? The first step for me is really to consider that regulatory whack-a-mole that I spoke about earlier, where it's essentially a reactive response to any particular regulations that come up. What you could do is approach the law as if it applied, approach what you do as if the EU AI Act applied to you, which I believe is what the EU is actually hoping for. What people refer to as essentially the Brussels effect of everyone applying the GDPR as the gold standard. They're hoping maybe that everyone will apply the EU AI Act as the gold standard. So it could be going to focus on that. If not, focusing on the principles on which the AI Act were actually based originally would be a good starting point. So looking at the OECD AI principles. If we're looking specifically internally at existing legislation, there are certain areas that I think cover certain specific elements of the AI Act already. So, for instance, if you were to take PAPIA and consider the way that you use personal information, there would be a significant overlap on the more sensitive uses of personal information and the prohibited or high-risk uses of AI in relation to that personal information. Obviously, if you're not engaging with personal information while using AI, that wouldn't necessarily apply. But there are ways of having that overlap, or at least trying to use existing legislation to get to where other countries are getting to at the moment without a established act or regulation.
Okay, thank you for that. That's an interesting insight for sure. So I think there's definitely a theme inside this, that there's definitely stuff that we can rely on. I mean, I think I've been speaking to a whole bunch of corporates as well, and they've indicated that in the absence of any official stern AI-specific regulation, they do have a couple of things in place right now to get by on. And part of that includes, for example, data privacy guidance, data management guidance, and all of that can still be employed to navigate the uncertainties of AI better. And of course, in order to implement regulations or even guidance within your organization, the use of some kind of tool is going to be critical, especially at the stage where it's very important that we rely on tools to do what you know, to keep an eye on some of these smaller items with regard to data management, data privacy, etc., that we in the past took for granted. Now we're going to have to keep an eye right down to that baseline factor, and we have to do that far faster than we've ever needed to do in the past. Basically, because AI, I mean, the simplicity of it is that you have all of these AI agents running around making decisions on behalf of you and your company right now as we speak. And there's a whole bunch of workflows right now that are AI-led and AI-driven that's making decisions about you, you know, taking your data into account and making those decisions about you and to do with you right this second. And they are growing and growing and growing in number. So by the day, by the week, by the month, there's thousands and thousands and thousands more AI agents making decisions that directly impact you, your team, your staff, your company, your brand. So this is happening so rapidly that we have to use some tool-based method to stay abreast, to ensure that all of our people in the organization are complying. I mean, how many of you here right now on this call, how many of you have some kind of data privacy guidance within your organization that is currently factually being violated each and every time one of your people go onto a public domain like ChatGPT and enter sensitive company information into that facility, which factually places your data into the public domain? How many of you right now are able to control that? I mean, if you can, by a show of hands, I'd love to know if you're able to truly control that in this day and age. And if you aren't, then you need to start thinking about how you can get more robust about applying and deploying relevant controls into your organization to ensure adherence to things like your basic data compliance practices. How do you self-assess? How do you monitor? How do you report back on the exposure of the organization? I'm going around and I'm talking to a whole bunch of boards right now. That's part of something that I've taken on for fun. And I tell you what, a lot of these boards are at odds as to how they go about and apply effective controls in this kind of situation. There's so much vulnerability for the planet today just on data management. Okay, I'll slow down for my rant. As you can see, I happen to take this particular topic very seriously. I got some good questions coming through, which we're going to address in a second. And I got a funny comment here from someone. I'll read it out in a second. But before we go into that, let me just ask you guys to just take a second and complete our poll. You should see a poll question. And in fact, what might be more useful, if you, I'll just give you the poll question and you could just type a yes or a no into the chat section. So the question is, do you want to be contacted by Cura to hear how they can assist you with your risk, compliance and governance management? All right, so it's all elements of your GRC. It doesn't just have to be your ERM or your risk management. If you'd like someone from Cura to assist you with getting to grips with your GRC in a more effective way, especially as we enter such a dynamic time from a technological point of view, where the prevalence of risks is far higher than in any other time in our history. I mean, I come from a long background in technology, and I can tell you now, I've never ever seen a time that is, or a period of work that is in such a state of flux. So there's lots of funny comments coming through, which is excellent. So folks, I'm going to encourage you here to please put down, just take a second, either type a Y or an N. If you type a Y, you can expect a follow-up from someone who's going to assist you monitor and manage this particular transition in a very effective way. This is not just about software, folks. This is about getting your processes right, about making sure that you're able to navigate the future tides of change more effectively. I want to go through some of the comments and questions that are coming through now. And one comment here that I think is kind of funny. It says, will this control be not as impossible as fully controlling a person talking about our company at a braai? And I think that that's an important comment, because people do have the liberty to go and talk about their anecdotes at work, their experiences at work, and there's no way you're going to fully control that. But it becomes a different story when you factually start entering privileged information into the public domain. And there's certain pieces of information where it's typically backed up by some kind of legislation that we are not meant to disclose. Like, for example, insurance brokers are not meant to transmit any data electronically unless a few measures are in place for the safe transmission of client confidential information. And if you're taking information of that nature, and if you're entering it into the public domain for convenience sake by using something like ChatGPT, and let's be honest, the average person out there is going to be using ChatGPT without malice. They're going to do it in a very harmless manner, and it's still going to be a violation of some kind of legislation, or perhaps a regulation that then exposes the company or puts the company at risk, because the company could then lose its license, or it could, maybe not comply with the KYC requirement. All of these things remain very, very important risks that need to be managed. And it's very hard in an environment where everyone now has so much power in their direct interaction and engagement with third-party AI agents. So in the spirit of that last rant, let's go to Titch for a second. Titch, do you have any comments on this theme of companies suffering more exposure today and how they can get around that, and now again leaning more into the compliance element, not just the ERM piece?
Yeah, so I think it's a valid risk that's being raised, that with the proliferation of these tools that anyone can access, and in the absence of substantive policies that directly speak to this is what we do with this technology and this is what we don't do, yes, the risk is very high that something is going to happen. And I think while I'm here, I'd like to address one of the questions that came up in the chat, where someone said, if you input code into a system and the system updates or works on that code and gives you a better outcome, who is now the owner of that product, right? Traditionally, they would say this was still your code because you created the source product. But the reality we're finding with a lot of the litigation that's happening, particularly around ChatGPT and what it's doing with the work of creatives, is it's very dicey. So if there's been any sort of manipulation that's happened, right, that system is able to claim ownership to the final product that it gave to you, even if the original input is yours. So what happens, for example, if you've entered a data set for customers who are supposed to be taking up a product, if that is now owned as a Creative Commons item, anyone who is putting in any sort of prompt that can yield that sort of information also has access to it. So not only do you have the initial risk of data loss or violation of data privacy, you now have a new set of risks around impersonation of identities. I know there was one of the insurance companies that suffered something similar recently, where a threat actor was able to utilize information that was publicly available to get information about customers. So how are we dealing with that? And I think the real solution is going back to basics. And that's the big thing that AI is shaking up around our strategies. we have to be very strong in the fundamentals of these are our principles. This is why those principles apply to us as an institution, and this is how we implement them through policies and frameworks. And this is how we ensure everyone who's on our team understands the how and the what of how they do their work.
Yeah, very, very valid points here. And I think that I really like the fact that you're getting us, really practical and grassroots about it. Folks, as we are continuing, we have a few minutes more before we start to wrap our webinar. I'm going to ask of you to, if you cannot, I see we have 4 responses here to the poll. If you could please go ahead and state either yes or no, and preferably just try to type in yes, no, a Y or an N will be sufficient, and then we will leave the follow-ups to us. We will get in touch with you relevantly. I do think you need to be pushing to have a deeper dive conversation, not just in a forum like this one, but in a forum where on a one-to-one basis, we can understand some of your specific challenges and we can give you some specific and tailored advice. You absolutely cannot let this train leave the station. The time window is getting smaller and smaller. We really need to start taking action. We really need to start getting involved in the right dialogue, and we really need to start putting measures in place. As you know, this is going to become the next big topic over the next easily 18 months, 2 years. Solving for this has never been more imperative, and with the introduction of more and more technologies that, like I said earlier, making more and more decisions on our behalf, we're going to see a lot more of this becoming a thing, a really prevalent problem in our future. With that, I just want to give each of our panelists the opportunity to do a quick close off from their side, just to impart some final words of wisdom and guidance to our audience. Let's start with Kevin.
Great, thanks. I suppose the most important aspect for me, as I've been speaking about before, is getting the governing body, getting the board involved in this, making sure that they actually have the framework in place, and the 3 essential items for them to do this is essentially being educated on it, to understand what the risks and opportunities are, the impact of AI. Understand the framework that they are going to put in place, the who is actually going to be, or rather where those decisions are going to be made, what level is the decision going to be made on. And then the third being finding the right people to fill those particular positions. And that's going to be a pretty difficult one to do. It's an entire different conversation, but these have to be people that have multiple skills, that sit perhaps even a task team that is comprised of people from risk, compliance, legal, operations, IT. It affects the entire business and needs input from the entire business.
Thank you so much for that, Kevin. Let's go to you, Titch, and then we'll end up with Christo.
All right, so in wrapping up, I'd say again, use case. That is the primary issue. Once you understand what your use case for AI is from a compliance perspective, it becomes much clearer on what it is you need to do going forward, both to leverage off the opportunities of AI and to effectively manage the risks, and to meet all of your existing and upcoming compliance requirements with regards to what you're doing through the use of that AI. And I think there are a number of frameworks that are coming up that we can use and embed into our existing systems. So like the ISO standard on IT currently and risk management actually has a module on AI. And I know NIST has also introduced a framework around AI risk management. Those are things you can plug into your existing GRC system, or speak to your provider around how those can be incorporated to help you document what you're doing and be able to effectively see where additional resources need to be placed to properly comply.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Titch. Thank you for those wise words. And then Christo, last but not least, let's end off with a word from our sponsor. You're officially representing Cura, the sponsor of this webinar. Any last parting words of advice from you?
Yeah, thank you. From my side to close off, I think obviously there's a vast amount of data that will come into any type of system, and I think is to have the right system in place to be able to manage that data, right? There's like AI will identify all these different type of information that come into the system, and how you're going to manage that information. And I think not to just view it in a system. You're not going to look at just regulatory compliance. You're not just going to look at incidents. You're not just going to look at risk and audit and stuff like that. But to have a system in place that can overarching look at all the data in one bucket, right? And that's the key here. Is that it's nice to have all this information available to you, but how do you manage all that information? How do you control that information? It's nice to have all this data available, but reporting it and controlling it, you know, that's a whole difficult thing all on its own. And the key here is to have a GRC system that can take all that information, combine it into one, and actually have a platform to view data across all these different solutions and different environments and different risk and compliance and whatever that might be. So I think that's the key here for me, is just to have the right system in place to actually look at all this data coming in.
Excellent. Thank you, Christo, for those wise words. Folks, the risk posed by AI today, it's very real, it's evolving, it's continually growing. As I mentioned earlier, it's increasing exponentially each day, each week, each month. We are exposed to more and more AI agents acting on our behalf, on behalf of our businesses. The need to stay informed, to safeguard your organization's GRC strategy has never been more prolific. I definitely think this is something that we need to take a lot more seriously. We need to have a lot more conversations of this nature. And this is really just the start. I mean, Cura will be leading a few of these very strategic conversations over the coming months. We really want to engage with a widening audience, where we bring in thought leaders like the folks that we have on the call today. And we want to share some of these these thoughts, ideas, discussions. We want to debate. We want to figure out how to get things right. On that note, I thank you all, and stay tuned for our next webinar. We'll announce that soon. If you have not yet indicated your choice, whether you would like to be contacted or not, please do so while you have a second in the meeting chat box. And like I said, stay tuned for future updates on what our next webinar is going to be like. Thank you all. Thank you
very much, everybody. Have a fantastic day. Cheers. Ciao.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.